Hello and welcome to Conversations from the A&amp Network. In this episode, I speak to Susie James, an adult adoptee and also a solo adoptive parent. She shares her experience of growing up adopted and navigating reunion with her birth mother as a young woman. Susie is now embarking on a PhD looking at post-adoption support for solo adopters, inspired by her own experiences of support. She also has a website collating the stories of adoptees, and you can find that at www.walktogetheradoption.com. As always, if you've experience of adoption, fostering or special guardianship from any perspective, personal or professional, and would like to share that on the podcast, please get in touch through the Facebook page, the app formerly known as Twitter, or you can email us at anfpodcast@gmail.com.
I'm Susie, and I'm an adoptee, and I'm an adoptive mother. I have a biological daughter, and I'm doing a PhD in experiences of post-adoption support as a single adoptive parent. And I also have a website which I started last year called walktogetheradoption.com. Which brings together people's stories of adoption, and we provide resources, do different stories and blogs, all kinds of different things to do with adoption.
Yeah, I mean, on that description is like there's not a lot of bases that aren't covered there, basically. So you've got a life that's totally immersed in adoption.
It is. I know. It's pretty intense.
So you asked to come on the podcast, and I was more than welcome to hear you, but can you help us make sense of that then? Because obviously, I mean, when people say they're adoptees, people are naturally really curious. Tell me a story.
Mm-hmm.
And then people, and you adopted. Well, I want to know about that. Tell me that. So what is your story then? You know, not what I want to hear. How would you kind of make sense of that story?
Yeah, I think, it's all threaded together, really. It's like a kind of, the thread of adoption has carried on through my life, strangely. So it started when I was adopted at 2-3 months old, which was a long time ago. I was adopted in the 60s, and life was very different, certainly around adoption then. It was almost, forced adoptions, which are very different to now. Circumstances were different, weren't they? And I was adopted into a very, sort of middle-class family who brought me up in Oxford, and my dad was a GP and sometimes psychiatrist, and my mum was a nurse. And I had a really amazing life in Oxford, actually. And those days were precious, and I made some literally lifelong friends from very early on. And they in a way, because I was an only child, until I discovered a half brother much later on. But those friends became my family, because my family was my parents were quite chaotic on their off work days, and big party animals. So life was at times quite unpredictable and unusual. So I think from quite an early age, I was quite hypervigilant. I'd say slightly on the edge of feeling, unnerved about what was going on, and and then it would be back to work and everything would be normal. So it was almost like there were two sides to our life, which I felt slightly embarrassed about the sort of the wild partying they used to get up to.
Because when you describe them there, you describe we lived in Oxford, my father was a GP, my mum was a nurse, dad's psychiatrist. Immediately we have this sort of vision of childhood that's sort of idyllic. In that sort of that place in the world and those professions. But that isn't necessarily how it, that's not the view from the inside, is it, necessarily?
No, it's not. It's not. And that's a fantastic veneer. They, how can I say it? They did their best. I loved them. They loved me. But they were a lot older and they were already leading that life. They had done for years. My dad was in the Navy. He was in charge of gin. They were based in Gibraltar and Malta and led that kind of, that funny sort of expat life. But years ago when it was quite glamorous, the white naval uniform and the cocktail dresses. It was slightly sort of, it was quite glamorous actually. And I do remember that glamour being quite present in their life. And I remember my mother's their bathroom, and I remember her mirror, which had those light bulbs that you see in actors or actresses' dressing rooms. And she had the semicircle of lipsticks, bright red lipsticks. So I used to sit in front of that mirror when I was really young and practice with the lipsticks and sort of those staggered levels of stiletto shoes, and extraordinary.
So how much then did adoption or you being an adoptee sort of feature in that? Was that just was that an aside, or was that something that were they open about that? Were they, all the questions coming out of the 60s, which was much more of quite of a closed time when it was, well, just get on with your life.
Yeah.
How did they manage that? Sorry.
No. I think it was very open to begin with. So although kind of been that open, because they didn't tell me till I was 7, but when they told me, I had lots of questions, like any other child, questions they couldn't or wouldn't answer. I don't know. And then it used to be a kind of, I don't think I was shocked. I can't really remember. Although I did get some kind of weird glandular thing that came up shortly afterwards and was there for a very long time and just disappeared. So I don't know if that was related or whatever, but it wasn't really spoken about much after that. It kind of became taboo without anyone saying it's taboo, so we don't talk about it anymore. It just wasn't. So all my questions, just went unanswered, really.
I mean, the current guidance is that if a child can remember being told, it's too late. But that sounds,
yes, exactly.
That sounds like a really distinct, a before and after moment. Was that overstating?
No, it definitely was. No, I remember it because I told my friends, and it became, and their parents must have known. So it became quite a feature in my imagination, and quite a story that I created about that. Always about who was my birth mother. Never really wondered about the father. And then I waited till when I was 18, sent off for my birth certificate, which was a huge thing. The only birth certificate I'd seen was just a tiny piece of paper, but this thing was huge with all the information on it.
And
My,
did your adoptive parents know about that? Was that something that you was that
no,
right?
no, I felt really guilty about that, but like almost that unfaithful feeling. No, I did it secretly, which is odd, but my birth mother's name was there, and the name she'd given me, which is not the same name, um, and her address in Dorset was on there. So I think I waited for a year or two, and then
My recollection of my children sort of getting any documentation that was from that time in their life, even as adults, and even if they knew what was going to be on it, it came with a real gravity that they were shocked by. And I just wondered why did you wait? What was the reason that you saw this information? You're 18 and 19. What stopped you?
what stopped me looking any further?
Yeah, at that point.
I think I think I had a lot of very complicated feelings. I think I was going through quite a quite a tricky time,
Hmm.
quite a mad time, and I think that's the explanation. Really, I don't think it was the right time to go looking, but I did go looking and drove down to that address and knocked on the door, which is kind of a mad thing to do. And the lady knew the family and said they've moved just to the next village. And so I called the next day. I found there were still phone boxes then, and I found the number and phoned the next day. And my biological grandmother answered the phone, and she said that she knew it was me later. I don't know how. And I spoke to my birth mother, explained who I was, and she said, "What's kept you so long? I've been waiting." So we met the next week. We met the next week in London. And that was really emotional. That was, yeah, there were people sitting either side of us. I just wonder what on earth they must have thought. We were very sort of locked in deep conversation, and there was lots of crying and things. Yeah.
I guess it's the stuff of romantic novels and TV programs, and it's the clinching moment of a film. But actually, when it's your life, that people sort of articulate them being really complicated. But also, I get a sense of you being quite alone in all of that. Is that fair?
Yeah. Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. Yeah, I did feel that actually. Um, and shortly after that, I mean, like the following week, she invited me round to meet my half brother. So she'd had my brother less than a year after me. She'd married his father, who's different to mine, to have another baby. And I met him. They didn't get on so well. He was I found him a little bit intimidating to start with.
Hmm.
I thought he was very clever and very sort of, I don't know, didn't seem like me. So, but I had always wanted a brother, so I was really thrilled to meet him, but slightly in awe, I think.
Hmm. You talked
Slightly in
about,
awe.
sorry,
Mm,
I don't want to cut across you if you're talking, but
no.
as you sort of you told of this little girl and this girl as she grew having this imagination and having sort of this curiosity, which who wouldn't? What child wouldn't? So how did the two things then, when you've got the reality and you've got these myriad of versions that you'd created in your head, how do you then sort of marry the two, or do you, or are you just
I think,
existing?
yeah, I was almost frozen, like almost very aware of what I was saying, very aware of anything I said. I was looking for approval, which, yeah, sounds a bit strange, but I wanted them to be kind of proud of who I'd become, but actually, I was so I was so unsure of who I was at that point.
Mm.
I was still working out my own identity, and that took quite a long time in itself. So I did feel quite insecure, but I was very
Yeah,
excited at the same time to find this family. It was a lot to process, a lot to sort of to
yeah.
try. I wanted to fit into that. I wanted to fit into that picture. But actually the reality was I didn't feel completely comfortable in that picture. I didn't feel completely comfortable except with my friends in the picture I'd grown up in. Um, I felt like I was trying to be something for my adoptive parents and trying to fit part of a puzzle with my birth family, something they could recognize. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But neither part sort of quite worked. And the reason it didn't work was because I couldn't be authentic. I couldn't be an authentic person because I didn't know who that was.
I mean, it sounds
That
like
took,
I was going to say, it sounds like that's almost the start of the story, isn't it? It's the start of the next
mm,
chapter where you
yeah,
and did your adoptive parents know that? When did they find out, and what was their sort of take on? Oh, look what you've gone and done.
no, they never knew. My parents died quite early on. Um, so my mother died in my 20s.
Right.
Um, so she didn't know. I just started my first business then, and my mother was incredibly supportive of me. I didn't have any money or anything, but I had complete belief. So I think that's where I sort of channeled um, some sort of search for certainly independence and to become the start of becoming a person in my own right, trying to find something that belonged to me or that was recognizable, tangible. So I did that initially for some years through accidentally almost through business. But before she died, she really supported me. And my father just didn't understand business at all. So he didn't get it. And he died shortly after. So yeah, that was a very difficult time as well.
Yeah, I mean,
Very,
you don't have to have much of an imagination to sort of put yourself in your position. This idea of you saying you're between two worlds and trying to find an authentic sense of self. That sounds like a really difficult way to start adult life. And so we could do a whole episode just about all of that.
mm,
Serialize the whole story. So then obviously you're now here, a few years on, and
hmm
you're an adoptive parent. So
hmm
I'm always slightly intrigued by adoptees who adopt, because often you'll talk and talk about a lot of really difficult things, and then you
Mhm.
find yourself adopting. And I
Mm.
just wonder how you reconcile those two things.
I I always wanted to adopt, and those friends I mentioned from childhood will always remember that. Um, so I guess that for me it wasn't a surprise, but I I had a I had a birth daughter. I had my daughter quite slightly late on as well. But when I separated from her dad, who was still friends, but when I separated from him, um, I did start the adoption process, and yeah, that took quite a while because I was single and having a birth daughter that slightly complicates things.
Mhm.
But yeah, it completely made sense to me in terms of having always wanted to. The the way I parent, and I'm sure my son would have something else to say about it, but the way I parent is is completely different. Whatever it is completely different to how I grew up. Well, obviously we're in
Yeah.
completely different times. Everything is different, but certainly with my daughter and my son, it's been far more sort of child centered, far more about the three of us and about them, really finding out
Mm.
what they're passionate about and being interested in what they love.
So I know your PhD
And
is in
yeah,
terms of post-adoption support and solo adopters, but what was your experience of going through the process of becoming an adopter? Because it's an intrusive experience, and I would imagine that, the minute you said, "Oh, I'm adopted," then everyone will have gone, "All right, like let's spotlight in on this," and that'll be a big part of that process. And so, well, was it? And how did you find that? Was it a cathartic process, or was it just a hoop to be jumped through?
um, I think luckily I had quite a lot of I'd worked through quite a lot of different emotional things that I'd felt since my own since my parents died and and since discovering my birth family, so that gave me some of the therapy they might have thought I would have needed
Right.
going through the adoption process, which I've heard from other people. A lot of it I'd had I'd had a lot of different therapies, so that had helped me in terms of what I was going to be faced with.
Mm.
Not all of it, but certainly in terms of projecting things possibly onto my kids or my adoptive son, um, and how I was what kind of parent was I going to be? You know, how much of my own experience was still there that would perhaps influence or infect how I would parent.
It's a lovely phrase you said. I've done a lot of work. It feels like it covers an awful lot of ground, that phrase. Um, so are you comfortable me asking you what brought you to
Mm.
start that work? Because that implies that things weren't as you thought they should be. And was that specifically post-adoption sort of a therapeutic intervention, or was it sort of just, or did it start somewhere else? I'm asking, it's a really garbled question, but I think you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think because I said I got my birth certificate when I was 18. I think I really went off the rails. I mean, I was really, involved in lots of with lots of different people, lots of different um situations that, weren't always safe, and friends were concerned for me and looked out for me. And so in my 20s I started to think about that and think, well, do I really want to be carrying on like this? And where's that going to lead?
Mm.
So someone recommended I just go and talk to someone. So it wasn't like a particular intervention or anything like that. It was purely going to talk to someone about where I was at and why I was behaving like I was behaving, what was going on. So it was really just expressing pain, different pain,
Mm.
um, you know, not understanding quite why I felt empty or sad or, that kind of thing.
Were they, was that,
Avoiding intimacy. Mm.
so was that, I mean, this is an adoption podcast. The conversation is about adoption. Adoption is a
Yeah.
thread. So was that,
Yeah.
I don't want to put words in your mouth, but was that a clear link to your experience as an adopted person, kind of going, well, that emptiness or that kind of fear of attaching, was that kind of all drawn back to your adoption experience, or was it just kind of termed more broadly in terms of just who you are?
Well, I think anyone could be brought up, and many people are in the type of situation I was with alcoholic parents. You don't have to be adopted for that. So anyone could have experienced what can I say? Challenges maybe after
Mm.
that, because living with alcoholics brings its own challenges. Often you want to rescue people or things like that. Being adopted, the link with the adoption was more around confusion. I felt having met my birth family, and then the people who raised me passing away,
Mm.
and almost, you know, not 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 being in either world, almost being in none, and sort of um, the lack of family, the lack of real family. And so I think that's what brought on that sort of, yeah, sort of despair, really, but acting out in different ways.
Yeah. Yeah.
But recognizing and having friends who recognized, hey, what are you doing?
And then sort of tried to point you in a better direction.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I'm doing a terrible job of interviewing you. So I'm taking you back to adoption process. I'm just following the
Yes,
breadcrumbs as you lay them out for me. So you went through the adoption process and you were approved to adopt.
yes. Hmm.
Um, and now you're an adoptive parent. So
Hmm.
how's that all going?
So that's been an eye-opening process, and I adore my boy, all 6'3" of him. I adore him, but boy, has it been challenging. It's been seriously challenging, um, and yeah, it's been a huge. He's had a growth spurt, but I've had a growth spurt. I've had a serious emotional growth spurt. So I have him to thank for that. And I mean that, actually. I do mean that, because no one else has given me that gift in that way, forced me to look, at different parts of myself, but, dark parts, because when you're faced with some extreme behavior of all kinds, whether it's, smashing up parts of the house or doing other things because he's expressing how he feels um, in those ways. He doesn't know what else to do. It's it's challenging, and you've got to be the tree, the tree that stands there, and you've got to be able to take it. You've got to be able to take it, manage it, and not hold it all in, which is actually what I did for a while, and that didn't work. That
Yeah.
was not clever, not clever at all.
I mean, there's a unique challenge as being a solo adopter in the midst of all that, isn't there?
Hmm.
That you shoulder the burden for all of it. Um,
Yeah.
and had you sort of anticipated the level of challenge that you clearly have experienced?
I thought I tried. I thought I had, but no, I couldn't have envisaged all of it, I must say. No,
So
no, I don't think so.
I'm guessing then that some of the challenges you faced were in terms of your experience of being a solo parent. And that leads me like seamlessly to your PhD, which is, drum roll,
Which is experiences of post-adoption support as a single adoptive parent.
So tell me, just entertain me. What's that all about then?
So that is about wanting to collaborate, to be heard. It's doing something with my own experience. That's what that is. And a friend of mine passed me the link to the research that was being done at Bradford. And when I spoke to the contact there, who's in a similar position, I just bought into it straight away. And I do love a challenge, I must admit. And I wanted to do that.
So tell me a bit about what you're actually doing, because are you interviewing solo adoptive parents? Are you doing surveys? Are you doing, what are you hoping to find out or do?
Well, the reason for the choice of a PhD is because the post-adoption support throughout my own experience with my son has not been forthcoming and not been relevant when I've needed it. So months later, after the event, doesn't particularly help, or 10 years to get an autistic spectrum diagnosis doesn't help, or, similar things. So that is why I'm doing it on post-adoption support, because I just can't bear it that people have to go through that. I know what that feels like. I know what that feels like at night to be in that situation when you don't really know what's going on. And I have a support network. I have an amazing support network. And I've had friends who've turned up at night and been there. I've had all kinds of things, but not to do them down, but they're not professionals. I'm not a professional. I'm a mum. And this is needed something that is more than one person. The whole thing about it takes a village. Well, the village weren't there. So, it absolutely, adoption is a bit in crisis right now. So I want to be another voice. Another voice to be heard.
I mean, clearly you are someone who's positive for all the complications of that story, your experience. You sound positive in terms of adoption.
I am.
Yeah. But I'm also conscious that it sounds like that some of the challenges you faced have been unique to you as a solo parent, and is that hopefully part of what you want to do, is to try and kind of really flag these up to try and get them addressed? Because do we know how many what is the percentage of adopters that are solo?
It's tiny. It's between 9 and 11%. 9 and 11%. And actually, I didn't answer your question at all, because you asked me about, I forgot what you've asked me now. You asked me about single adopters and what are the challenges, and what am I going to do? What's my methodology? Yeah. But I'm early on. I'm so early on. I'm in the first year and I haven't reached that stage. But I do know that I want to listen to people. I want to hear people's experiences, single adopters' experiences, and I want to find out I want to, apart from the people I know, I want to find out what their experiences are, to try and hear what their needs are, because they are different, obviously, to a couple.
Yeah, I mean, not even on a practical level, that you can't expect adoptive parents, solo adoptive parents, to turn up to events because they need a babysitter.
Yeah, exactly.
Just
It's so
like obvious
basic.
stuff.
I mean,
Yeah.
I know. Well, even when the child's young, I mean, just going to the shop or something is a mission. Well, you can do it all online, but you know what I mean. Just
Yeah.
you have to be organized and manage your life around those things and unpredictable things.
Yeah. So I'm following this thread of adoption in your life. We'll stretch the metaphor to it's an elastic thread. You also have a website. So tell me about your
Yeah.
website and where did that come from in the midst of all of the other stuff that's going on?
So the website is called walktogetheradoption.com. And the purpose of the website was, before the PhD, not long before, but before I even thought about that, was to create something where adopters could share stories and try and share experiences of what they were going through, to try and because we normalize, as adopters, we normalize a lot of very abnormal behavior, and we sometimes we get used to challenges in behavior that actually it takes someone outside to point out that's really not normal. That actually, I'm not sure that should be happening even in your situation. So it's to try and give resources, provide help. There are various things out there that do try and help. You know, other adopters, other adoptive parents. Some of them have created the most incredible, sometimes very local to
Specific.
wherever they are. Yeah, but incredible things. So yeah, that's what it was. And it was a friend I'd met when I did my psychology degree 8 years ago at Bournemouth, and she set up the website for me, and then we run it together, and we decide each month what kind of story we're going to run, or there may be people asking for a particular type of information or resource, or point them to an event, you know. But
Excellent.
I actually I love the title, The Walk Together, now, because we're having all kinds of ideas around that, around the walk together. And maybe I'll use that. Maybe I'll use that as an interview method. Maybe I'll go and walk together with adoptive parents and listen to their experiences.
Oh, that's fantastic. That sounds really useful. And I think that the power of stories is they're windows into understanding, aren't they? That sort of cuts through, highfalutin language, but we can listen to a story and go, I see myself in that story. That makes sense to me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Susie, it's been absolutely fantastic to speak to you. Really appreciate you giving me time. And when you're a bit further down the line with your PhD, will you come back on and share your findings, your results with us?
I'd love to. I'd absolutely love to do that. Yeah,
Perfect.
thank you so much.
Well, look after yourself. And again, thank you very much for coming on.
Thanks very much, Al. See you soon.